as we welcome in other voices, maybe if you haven't yet spoken, you'll kind of push yourself forward. It's hard to do on Zoom, I realize. But I apologies that we won't take everybody's answer. But I think this question of what the aim of music is an important one to discuss. And it might seem really obvious, but actually, if you haven't asked yourself, and if you haven't discussed it with your co-leaders, if you're leading with other people, you're potentially pulling in different directions. So, Kath, I'm just going to ask you if you can mute. Yeah, okay. I think someone's done it for you. It's fine. So I think it's worth at some point having that conversation so that you can make sure that you're on the same page. We've got lots of really lovely answers here, all of which are absolutely legitimate. And to which I'm going to add something which I think, Lena, you were probably hinting at, which is it's a way of communicating both with God and with each other. Now, we often, for whatever reason, I think particularly progressive Jews, Reform liberal Jews, have a tendency not to use the word God, right? To talk about prayer and community and connection. But actually, perhaps the music is a way to have some kind of communication with the divine, whatever that means for each of us. And it will mean something different for each of us, but also with each other. So maybe we'll just add that to our list. I think there are some other questions that we might want to ask ourselves as we go through this process of planning. And some of them will be really obvious, like, does my congregation know this melody yet? I would add in brackets. Do they know this? Because if they don't, I might just need to have a different color on my cue sheet so that I can see these are the number of things that are going to be new. These are the number of things that everybody will know. I get a sense of how much is new. Do my congregation know this melody yet? Does this melody that I'm going to use help me to express the text? Now, actually, I'm going to jump all the way to a note I've made for myself for the very end, because on page, I'm going to give you an example, 358 in the Yom Kippur, book. So, right, we've got it split into Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. On page 358 of the Yom Kippur book, you will see that there is a text that leads into the text that says, the Nachman of Bratslav text that says, Kol ha'olam kulo gesher tzar me'od. Now, if you were thinking of a melody for that text, anyone give me a melody?
Kol ha'olam kulo gesher tzar me'od.
Brilliant, perfect. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, that's what I assumed we were probably going to sing. Does anybody have a different melody for that? Okay, so as it happens, there is a different melody for a slightly different setting. I'm not going to talk about that for a minute because that doesn't help you. If that's the melody that you know, what are you going to do? Say, well, we just won't use that. That is one option. And actually, this is a section where you could choose different options. But let me just play you something. Now, I'm aware that what I'm doing is giving you an example of something where it helps that I have a pianist in this example. But let me give you an example of something just for you to hear something quite different and see how it feels. So I'm stopping only because you know it. What you notice there is nothing about that was complicated. It's not a choral arrangement. There's no harmony. We're just singing gently and slowly. And one of the things that we're doing is taking out the bits that make it the kind of fun, upbeat song, right? So we're not going, Geschert Zame Od 2, 3, 4, or whatever we might know from camp. Now, I know that that's so obvious, but it's just an example of how you can take something that you know, take something that the congregation knows, and completely change the feeling. It does mean that the person who's leading it needs to start really confidently, because if you don't take control, the congregation will run with it. But actually, if you were to even just start by totally a cappella. Right, you get the idea? It totally changes the feeling. So things, when I say, does the melody I'm going to use help express the text? Don't be fooled into having to say, no, it doesn't, and therefore I'm out, therefore I've got nothing. But maybe, can I change the way I use this melody? Can I use a melody the congregation will really know, but use it in a different way? So those are the first two questions. Does the congregation know the melody, and does the melody help express the text? And can I change how I use it? The third question is, does it fit within the journey of the service? Now, that is a much bigger question, and you can only really do that once you've gone through and written, okay, I know this for this, I know this for this, I'm going to use this here, I'm going to use this here. But a lot of you have been in sessions I've led before about the journey and the arc of a service, right? We've looked before at an arc of tefillah, of services. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we don't have really high energy, really calm, really high energy, really calm. That we're not taking people with a kind of whiplash feeling through the service. So how are we going to make the connection so that the music takes people on a journey in the same way that the liturgy does? And then the last question you might want to ask yourself, and again, this is kind of, if you have time and you get to this point, brilliant. What might be the emotional response that this music is going to engender? What's the emotional response I want from this moment? We've got some difficult liturgy on the High Holy Days. And if we get to it, we may get to it, but the idea of Yom Kippur just a few days after October the 7th is not going to be the easiest thing that we ever do. And so thinking about, what do I want to do here? Am I trying to give people a sense of uplift? Am I trying to leave them feeling more positive? Am I trying to bring them down? Maybe for different services, I'm trying to do different things. Yom Kippur is a long day. Perhaps Yom Kippur brings the mood, Kol Nidre brings the mood down. But by the time we get to the end of Ne'ilah, I want to leave people feeling positive and uplifted. What's the emotional response I'm trying to create here? Okay. So with apologies that I'm pushing us through quite fast, because I suspect we could have many more conversations about this. Is everyone okay so far? Yeah, great. Okay. So things, again, that I suspect you know, but just to remind us, we cannot have everything be unfamiliar. So what does that mean if we're in a congregation that don't know a huge amount of High Holy Day music? I want to give you one really simple example of how you can help yourself. Some of you will have heard me talk about this many times, and for those of you who know this already, apologies. We have a concept of what we call Sinai melodies. So Sinai meaning literally that it comes from Sinai. Of course, these melodies did not come down from Sinai with Torah, but we think of them, sorry, Warren, we think of them as being so traditional that it's as if they are Sinai. In some cases, they might only be 100 years old. It's not about age. It's about the tone that they set. And the idea that they kind of place us securely within a festival. So for the High Holy Days, our Sinai melody is multiple versions of Yai Dai 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 Yai die 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 die. Yai die ya da 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 die yai die die die. If you just were to teach people this, and by the way, you don't need to remember these things because there's going to be a whole load of recordings that we share with you and sheet music and all sorts of things. But if you only teach your community that one nigun, that misinai nigun for the high holy days, you will be able to weave it throughout your services. In an ideal world, you teach it during Elul. If your congregation don't come, if the people that you're worried about not knowing anything don't come during Elul, then teaching it during Elul won't help them. You could send them a recording of it and say to people, if you want to learn one melody for the high holy days, here's the one thing that would really help you. You could get a group of people together and teach them that one thing, invite people to come and learn it. But that will act as a sort of way that you could weave a melody through. I'm going to share a recording with you for a second. And this is an example of how you can use this melody. This is not actually a particularly traditional way of using the melody, but it is a way of using it for Nisim B'chol Yom, the daily blessings, which on Shabbat you might sing either Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam, whatever the end of the blessing is, or you might know it as Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam, the end of the blessing. Different ways that communities sing it. So what are you going to do on the high holy days? You could do that. But equally, here's another thing you could do. Let me just give you a couple of examples.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani b'tselem Elohim.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shelo asani nochi.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asa li kol tzorki.
So I could give you plenty of examples, but I think for now you've probably got the idea. It's something really simple, but quite early on in your service, it says, this isn't the service we know, but don't panic. We're not totally changing everything on you. Perhaps you've even used that nigun to start the service. And now you can weave it back in at this point. Then it comes potentially back in if you want to at Baruchu. And again at Micha Mocha. So you've got multiple places where that melody can weave its way through. And by doing that, you add a tiny bit of kind of traditional melody without it being something that's too difficult for the congregation to join in with. And without it being something that alienates the congregation because they don't know it. Is everyone okay? Make sense? Yeah? Okay. So that's a kind of an idea of trying to weave something through your service. And it doesn't have to be that melody. It's just that that's a really simple way of doing it. If I work my way briefly through the services, I'm going to give you a little bit of a sense of what I would encourage us to think about when we're planning the music for the different services. So Slichot for me should feel kind of like a musical hug. It's sort of our musical melodies. We often describe it as being like a musical overture. So any melodies that your congregation know that are High Holy Day melodies should find their way into Slichot. If all that means is that everybody knows Avinu Malkeinu, right? Then okay, fine. If you start with that as your nigun at the beginning of Slichot to set the scene, that's absolutely fine. It doesn't need to be all incredibly complicated things, but it should help people to go, okay, I know where I am. I'm placing myself again in this moment, in this season. By the time we get to Erev Rosh Hashanah, I think we tend to take Rosh Hashanah very seriously. And it might be that that is the best thing for your congregation. But if we think of Rosh Hashanah as also a celebration of creation, you might go with triumphant or joy as the words you're trying to express. Not the whole way through, sure, But Erev Rosh Hashanah, I don't know how many people you tend to have coming to your services. I can only speak from my experience, but in my experience, it tends to be people who really come to shul anyway, people who understand shul services and are connected to shul. They tend to be the people who come to our Erev Rosh Hashanah service. So a little bit of joy is not a terrible thing. I think we can sometimes feel like it's Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, it has to be very serious. Something like the Svika Pik Shehechianu, if that's a melody that is familiar to you, that is Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Shehechianu V'kimanu V'higianu Lazman Hazeh, has a really long Amen. And all people need to know for that is the word Amen. They don't even need the rest of the Hebrew. But if Shehechianu is us arriving at a new point, it could even be an opportunity to turn to the people around you and say, is there something that you're grateful for having reached this point, this new year? Okay, let's gather a couple of examples, or let's just have heard the ones that we heard from the person sitting behind us or in front of us. And let's sing Shehechianu. That's just as legitimate of a thing to do on Rosh Hashanah as using Misinai melodies and Nusach and being more kind of serious, if you like, about the music. That is a beautiful way to bring people in, to welcome their voices and to say, we've reached the start of a new year. It's definitely a Shehechianu moment. So that's Erev Rosh Hashanah. I'm really just throwing thoughts at you here, so apologies. It's a little bit of a rush through the High Holy Days. Rosh Hashanah morning, what you'll find in the new Machzor, and you've probably seen this because we had the trial for a while. Oh, that's a nice rhyme. Is that the Psukei de Zimra, the kind of warm-up section, everything pre-Baruch Hu, let's say, which is not exactly Psukei de Zimra, there is a whole section of liturgy there. And the thing that our editors of our Machzor have done is give us lots of different options. So find something that's familiar to you. Perhaps that is something that you sing on Shabbat. I don't think that's a problem. If it brings people's voices in, we're warming people up, we're moving towards Baruch Hu. There are other places to make it about High Holy Days and High Holy Day music. So I would make Psukei de Zimra and that lead up to Baruch Hu be about welcoming people's voices in whatever way you can. And then when you get to the Amidah, you've got lots of opportunities to bring in the kind of sound of the season. So that can be the melody that you use for Mechalkel at the beginning of the Amidah or for Zochreinu. Those are opportunities, and we'll have different melodies between our communities, but I suspect those are more likely to be melodies that people know. So something like Mechalkel or Zochreinu will place us in the music of Rosh Hashanah without that needing to happen right at the beginning and still let people participate. I want to point out one musical thing for Rosh Hashanah, because if I were going to choose one, this would be the theme of the day. You might not be surprised to hear me say that it's the Great Aleinu. If you want to just, if you have a Machzor in front of you, it is on page 333 in the Rosh Hashanah book. So the Great Aleinu is the piece of liturgy that opens up the Malchuyot section of the Shofar service, right? Our Shofar service is broken into 3 sections, and Malchuyot, which is all about sovereignty, traditionally we'd say kingship, has the Great Aleinu. Now, when you look at it, it just looks like Aleinu, which we know from our Shabbat services. But actually, as far as we know, liturgists will tell us that the Great Aleinu, the Aleinu that we find in Malchuyot, is actually the original Aleinu, and that it made its way into Shabbat services from here and not the other way round. It's not that we sing or read, pray Aleinu every Shabbat, and we decided to just pop it in the High Holy Days. It's that it was here as our expression of sovereignty, and we decided to borrow it from here to put into our services. I love, and I could talk about this for a very long time, I love the text of Aleinu because it says, having done all of this praying, now what we're saying is, it's all on us. Aleinu, literally, it is on us to do the work of taking this tefillah forward. But the Great Aleinu has its own melody. It's only heard on Rosh Hashanah. And you may well be familiar with it. You'll have different versions of it, but it is the melody. It sounds a little bit like a shofar call. Aleinu is how it starts. That melody should only be heard on Rosh Hashanah. So you've got this kind of one-off opportunity. It's just worth knowing that that happens at that moment, and it acts as a call both to the shofar service and also to doing the work that we've been praying about in the service that leads up to it. So I'm just flagging that to you as something, if you wanted to make one change that is a kind of one-time deal, that would be one that I would suggest is worth thinking about. It might be that you think, Zoe, you're totally crazy. I cannot change that. Of all the things I change, people will lynch me. You know your congregation, right? So if that doesn't work for you, trust yourself, not me. Just if you are looking for opportunities of ways to bring in really significant moments in the High Holy Days, that is one. Okay. I'm going to flag for you that Shabbat Shuvah has insertions liturgically that are the High Holy Day insertions.
Sorry, Zoe, where can we actually hear this Elena that you're talking about, this the melody for it, or will you send it to us, or can we get it from somewhere?
I can't play you a recording right now, but
Right.
there is a website which Sass is going to show us in a minute that has essentially all of these tefillot listed, and then links to where you can find the sheet music, and where we have a recording, it has a link to the recording. We're just finishing up this resource. So
Okay,
you
thanks.
should be able to easily find that. I'm just not going to play it right now just because I want to keep us moving forward. So I'm just flagging to you, Shabbat Shuvah, first of all, so the Shabbat in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur has insertions in it in blue. You could just read them, but they are insertions that you know from Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur liturgy, and they are things like the way that we sing Machalkel or Zohrenu. So if you can do that on Rosh Hashanah, if you choose to do that on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, I'm just reminding you that you can also do it on Shabbat Shuvah. But I'm also flagging it for you because October the 7th falls in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And so you just might want to have considered that before October the 6th, when you suddenly go, oh my gosh, how are we going to deal with this? And particularly on that Shabbat, you might want to think about it. That could be, again, a whole other session. So for now, I'm just flagging it for you. And maybe Sassy and I should think about how we help people with that musically, but we'll come back to that. Okay. Yom Kippur. On Kol Nidre, I don't think you need me to give you a huge amount of help. You will have some version, I imagine, that is based on the Bruch Kol Nidre, and the Bruch Kol Nidre is actually based on the Nusach of Kol Nidre, just so you know. That melody, I think, firmly helps to place us. If you are struggling with what it means to sing that, you could imagine having a group of people sing it. You could also see if there's an instrumentalist in your congregation, right? Originally, it's not a sung piece. So do you have somebody who plays cello beautifully or violin beautifully, or can somebody play it just as the congregation are settling as a way of setting the tone? That could be another way of doing it. I will just say to you, when I say, can somebody play it beautifully, I really do mean, can somebody play it beautifully? I would never say that about the way that we sing things. Every voice is welcome, the more the merrier. What you don't want is someone who says, oh yes, I've got my child's grade 2 on violin, I'm sure they can play Kol Nidre. Don't do that, you will regret it. So just to say, it could be lovely, it could set the scene beautifully, but you really do need to make sure that it's exactly what you want ahead of time, or I will end up being in trouble afterwards. In the Machzor, Cantor Tamara Wolfson has written a really beautiful whole piece about Kol Nidre, so it might be worth just having a look at that, and therefore I'm not going to spend time on it, but it's in the Machzor. Yom Kippur Day. I think our biggest challenge with Yom Kippur Day, and again, you'll do it in your own way, it feels to me, at least the way that I'm used to it, like a train journey. And the challenge with train journeys is that the journeyers will embark and alight at all different points throughout the day. And we have to somehow find a way to make them feel welcome, even when people are coming in and going out at all different points. Now, whether or not you have services the whole way through the day, or you start and stop and have a break, and whatever you do, people will come when they want to come and they'll leave when they want to leave. Particularly for me, with Yom Kippur Shachrit, that's a real question to ask yourself. Again, it will depend on how it works in your congregation, but I'm just going to share for us. We have family services on Yom Kippur morning. Those family services take up about the first hour of the service. So that means that about an hour in, we suddenly get a whole host of people coming to join us. We need to find a way to acknowledge that, not just to say, oh, well, they come when they come and I hope it's okay. Sure, to some extent, I don't have control over that, but I do know it's going to happen. So maybe I just need to think about, can I teach something in the family service that's going to come up in the main service just to help people make that connection? Is there some way I can say, if people arrive an hour late, it's okay? One example, and again, you'll have to see what's right for you, because we end up as a very large number of people, but we start off the morning with a whole load of people who say, services at 10:30 on Yom Kippur, I'm going to be there all day. Why would I come at 10:30? I'll come when I feel like it. And people essentially trickle in. For me, what that means is we start our service leading in a different place, because we're in a very large room with a very big bima, which is not typical of my community at all. So rather than leading up high on this crazy bima and having 10 people in the room or 20 people or whatever it is, I lead on the floor. And at a certain point, whether that's Baruch Hu or the Amidah, then I go up onto the bima. Now that's tricky if you have a choir. You have to think about how you communicate. I'm conscious that there's at least one person in the room where that is the case for them, so I'm just flagging it. But you don't have to start in the same place you end. Maybe you move because your congregation might need you to be a little closer to bring them in. It's just a thought, something to bear in mind. And again, I'm going to flag for you in Shachrit that you've got very different examples of ways to bring people in. So within the early part of Shachrit, there are a couple of examples. I'm just going to give you two, where very close together, you've got Baruchi Nafshi. There's a Solomon 4-part arrangement that you might know, even if you know it just as the melody. Baruchi Nafshi et Adonai. Feels quite traditional. There's also the melody of the text by Yehuda Halevi, Ya'ana Emtsa'acha, God, where would I find you? That has a completely different, much more informal kind of folk melody to it. Do you want that moment to feel like a folk melody that people can join in with, or do you want it to be the Solomon choral Baruchi Nafshi? Those are decisions you can make, but you need to look at the examples and see what's going to work best for you. When we get to Musaf, I want to just think with you for a minute about Unatana Tokef. So Unatana Tokef as the kind of central, sorry, I'm just going to drop myself a second. Sarita, I'm aware there's someone trying to get in, so I'm just flagging that to you. As the kind of central prayer of Musaf is this really, really tricky piece of liturgy. It's always difficult because it's the liturgy that speaks about who will live and who will die, and how are the many ways that people are going to die in the coming year. I don't know if you have a fixed way that you sing that, but you might want to think about the way that you sing it. I don't mean change the melody. And I've really been thinking about this because we have a very lullaby-esque melody. We sing a melody that was written by Meir Finkelstein. And I'm not sure if that for me might be too straightforward. It might be too simple for this year, or I might need it to feel like a lullaby. I'm still working on what I want to do personally in our congregation with that. I might need to talk about it for a minute before I sing it. I might just need to acknowledge it. Maybe that's all I need to do. But if you sing something that has much more of a majestic tone to it, so I'm thinking there's a melody that goes, Barosh Hashanah Yikatevun, Uviyom Tzom Kippur Yechatemun. It's very dramatic, that melody. That's a hard melody right now for what we've experienced in the last year. but I don't have to change the melody. I might just sing Baruch Hashanah Yechateimhu Uviyom Tzom Kippur Yechateimun, and just introduce it in a different way. It's same melody, just done in a different way. But also don't be afraid either for you or to ask someone who works with you to introduce it so that actually you set the scene in a different way and you acknowledge that it's difficult rather than just kind of glossing over it, hoping people won't notice. Mincha, my only message for you is that this might be, if you do Mincha, it might be an opportunity for some space and time. Jonah spends time in the belly of the whale to figure out what's going on. Maybe we just need a little bit of space and time. It's not terrible to have some silence as well as a lot of music. Sometimes the silence helps to add to the power of the music, rather than feeling like you have to sing everything. Mincha, I often would suggest, is a good opportunity to give people a little bit of space, space to reflect, space to be, and not necessarily to have to sing and read everything in the book. Yizkor, again, I'm going to, and again, you'll have to do what's right for you. I'm going to say Yizkor this year, I think is a hard one. Just think about how you're bringing people in. It's one of the places where people get on board the train, right? People often come back for Yizkor. So are we just welcoming them again with just to welcome them back into the space so that they don't start with something totally unknown? That's an option. The text Lakol Zman from Ecclesiastes, to everything there is a season, is at the start of our Yizkor service in this book. There are some beautiful settings in Hebrew of Lakol Zman. But equally, if you are in a community that would appreciate it, you could do worse. Again, I'm a little nervous to give you this opinion, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. Than an a cappella, very gentle setting. To everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. Right? I'm not going to sing it like the birds, but I could totally change the way I sing it. It's the same text, and maybe it will help as a pathway in. And then Ne'ilah. And for me, Ne'ilah is an opportunity to bring every voice in. Now, I love the fact that Denise said, basically, everybody sings the whole time regardless. If you are in a community where people don't sing the whole way through, I would invite you to see whether there's a way that when you get to Ne'ilah, you can welcome everybody's voice. So as an example, again, I'm sharing from my own experience, we give our choir members solos during Avinu Malkeinu. So one member, each time we sing it, will lead Avinu Malkeinu Chatanu Lefanecha, and those will do the kind of, if you like, the alternate bits, right? And then the whole congregation sing Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, and then we go back to the solo. We don't have that solo for Ne'ilah. We lead Ne'ilah with a group of people from the choir leading it, so that it's clear that anybody who wants to sing along can sing along. We don't have, really, we don't have any solos in Ne'ilah. So if you are working with a choir, I would just ask whether you need solos. I will say that if you work with a group of volunteers, you need to be aware that people feel very connected to their solos. I'm sure you know that already. So if, Fred has always sung the Ne'ilah Avinu Malkeinu and you suddenly say, Fred, you're not singing it anymore, good luck. You might want to think about having a conversation with the whole choir. How would we feel about if we didn't have solos in Ne'ilah? It's something you will need to think about gently. But I cannot tell you how much for us it's made a massive difference, that it feels like everybody's voice is welcome. Because by the time you get to Ne'ilah, everyone wants to sing anyway. So rather than people feeling like they have to sing kind of sotto voce, they have to sing really quietly along just in case, or they don't care by that point and they're just disturbing the solo, actually what would happen if we really welcomed everybody's voices? It's an option. Okay, I want to give you one more example and then I'm going to stop talking. Sarita's going to show you a resource and we might have some time for questions, I'm hoping. what I'm going to play you is just giving you another example of how to use melodies you know in a different way. If you want to follow to see where this has come from, turn to page 355, I think. Let me just check that that's right. Yeah. If you look at the bottom half of page 355 in the Yom Kippur Musaf service, here is an example. This would need a speaker and a singer of how you might do this, but I just wanted to share this example with you.
True, we are often too weak to stop injustices, but the least we can do is to protest against them. True, we are too poor to eliminate hunger, but in feeding one child we protest against hunger. True, we are too timid and powerless to take on all the guards of all the political prisons in the world, but in offering our solidarity to one prisoner we denounce all the tormentors. True, we are powerless against death, but as long as we help one man, one woman, one child live 1 hour longer in safety and dignity, we affirm the right to live. There is much to be done. There is much that can be done. It is not your duty to finish the work, but neither are you free to neglect it.
So it would be fun to listen to the whole thing, but you will be able to listen to the whole thing because it will be on the website. I want to acknowledge that not everybody, not all of us, have the gift of the extraordinary Leo Nicholson playing beautiful piano in the background. But if you don't have a pianist, it may just mean that you as the musician are humming. While somebody is reading. There are plenty of ways that you can have both things happening, even if you don't have a piano or a guitar or whatever it is you might use. You don't need to have the instruments. Setting the sense of this is a melody we know, I'm singing it gently underneath the reading is a totally legitimate way to do it, even if you're singing a cappella. So, Sas, could you possibly show us, just even very briefly, by sharing your screen, let me stop sharing, what we've got here, just so that people know approximately what to expect. Great. Okay, so here's a little bit of an example. What you will find the whole way through is the page number for the text, multiple. So let's use Shema Kolenu because we can see that here. Oh, no, you were just there. Go, yeah, perfect. So you've got Shema Kolenu here, and you've got the different composers. So what we've called trad, because we don't know who composed it, that is Shema Kolenu Adonai Eloheinu. That's only trad to the UK, by the way. And we've got a recording here, happens to be in this case from the FRS choir. There are recordings of other choirs too. And then further over, you've got a link to the sheet music so that you can find the sheet music as well. If you go to Max Helfman, the same will be true. You'll have a recording. You can see that takes you to a link on YouTube, and then a place to go and buy the sheet music for the Helfman Shema Kolenu, which is a huge piece and a very, very different feeling. And then some more unusual melodies, this Josh Goldberg melody, Benji Schiller's melody, and even a Dan Nichols melody. So those are very different examples. Max Helfman is probably the most majestic. The traditional melody is possibly the melody that you will know. And then there are a couple of other examples if you were looking for something more creative. But basically what we've done is we've gone through and tried to give you a sense of, here are the different melodies. Here is where we know there's a recording that exists already. Here's where you can find the sheet music. And there will be some things that we don't have recordings for, but hopefully it's enough to be helpful to kind of be able to build up a little bit and add things where you want to, or think of examples you maybe hadn't thought of. So that's what this resource is. Okay. Questions? Thoughts, opinions? Tell me these are terrible ideas if you want to, or ask specific questions, or
My
anything
specific
that you want.
question, Zoe,
Rachel,
is
yes.
can we clone you to several synagogues, please? Because we love you in Blackpool so much. See, Sarita's up for that, so let's do a cloning.
You're very lovely. To be honest, if I could clone myself, I already have enough work to do just staying at Finchley.
No, it's just so helpful, and it's especially you know, we're not rabbi led, and it's just so good to be able to have these different thought processes on. I think you do get used to doing things a certain way, and you kind of go along those routes because that's what you're comfortable with and that's what you know. And it was great when the girls were doing RSY because they brought other routes in, and it was like, wow, we love it so much. And of course, conferences. But just hearing you talk, I think it just makes you think a little bit more about, like you say, the liturgy, the tunes, the different ways of actually putting some of these services together. And so thank you very much from me.
Totally welcome. Thanks, Rachel. Fiona.
Thanks, that was really helpful, Zoe. I think your point about people not knowing where they're going with this because they never come to synagogue is really, really important. And one thing that I've always done is that every single sub bit of service starts with die, 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 to settle everyone down and just get them in the groove. And I use it for everything I can to which the text fits.
Yeah.
And I think people appreciate that because it gives them a sort of an anchor, even if we never see them from one year end to the other. So I would really encourage other people to adopt the practice as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it can be really, really helpful. Thanks, Fiona. Pauline.
I just wanted to say thank you for offering suggestions. This shows where there's no choir, because here in Newcastle, we don't have a choir. So that I've thought, oh, that's really helpful. And also for on the website, having links to where people are singing it, because again, a lot of us don't read music. Some people can read music and you know, are so helpful and fantastic, but it's great to have something we can look at without being able to read music. So
Pauline,
thanks for putting that extra effort there.
Totally welcome. For what it's worth, you may not have a choir, but if there are a small group of members who love music, I would really massively recommend that you find a way to get together, not to form a choir, but just to say, okay, is there one thing we're introducing that's new on Rosh Hashanah? Is there one thing we're introducing that's new on Yom Kippur? Can we all at least know it? Can we all have listened to it? Can we come together and see how it feels to sing it together? And actually build support in that way, rather than feeling like you have to lead things on your own. I already know that you've got other people in Newcastle and when they're here as well, who can really be massively helpful. So if there's a way to get together ahead of time, you know, at some point in September, maybe have 1 or 2 sessions together and just say, here are some things that we're thinking about at this point, it will massively help the congregation because you'll all know what you're trying to do.
We normally do 2 or 3 if we can, and it does definitely help because obviously you're only doing these things once a year.
Yeah,
and it does help to refresh, but we'll be able to play people things hopefully as well. That will help.
Right, yeah, you can use the website to play things, definitely. Great. Any other questions, thoughts, opinions? We're technically finished. Let's try and finish in the next 2 minutes.
I just want to say we are so blessed to have our Zoe here. Isn't she amazing? Like, And if you want to see more of her, like, she blows me away every time, and I've worked with her for so many years, and every time she just pulls something like this out of the bag and says the recording won't be useful, but I can tell you, everyone, that this recording is totally being shared with lots of people. It will be so useful, and we are so lucky to have her. Thank you, Zoe. You are phenomenal. If you want to see more of her like this, you should join Shirei Hagiga, because she can do this for everything.
I actually, as you've made a cheeky plug, I'm just saying, I just spent time earlier on today with a couple of priests and a couple of people who run Muslim schools, talking about music of social justice. And we are going to try and run a music of social justice conference in June 2025 for half a day. So I'm just saying, if you like music, maybe keep your eyes open. I will try and flag more information about it when I have it, but it could be fun. Pauline, you're asking about where you get the recordings. So we have had the total blessing of student cantor Chessie Weiner, who has done a lot of the legwork of really pulling stuff together. I am not super technologically minded, and she is much better at this. She's just finishing it up. The recordings that I played you today are not actually the edited recordings. I played cheeky unedited recordings, so don't tell anybody. She will add those as links, and then we will be ready to go. So as soon as that's done, I'm sure that Sarita will make sure that everyone here has the links to send everything.
Where do we find the recording of today's session, I meant?
I can send it out afterwards. In fact, I'm going to stop the recording now because this bit's not interesting for our listeners.